Pedro Morales is one of the most overlooked wrestlers of all time. He became the first Latino WWE Champion, going on to reign as the sixth longest champion in history and becoming the first Triple Crown winner. However, in 2019, at 76 years old, Pedro would pass away from Parkinson's disease. Despite all his greatness, why is this legend rarely mentioned by WWE? In 1942, Pedro Morales was born in Culebra, Puerto Rico, a tiny Caribbean island so small you could walk across it in a single afternoon. But what this island lacked in size, it made up for in family ties that would shape Pedro's entire worldview. Picture this: a young boy growing up in a family so vast it seemed to stretch across the entire island. With 85 cousins on his mother's side alone, he'd often quip that you couldn't throw a stone in Culebra without hitting one of his relatives. Most of the island's population was related to him, a fact he'd share with his characteristic laugh. From the busy streets of 1950s, Brooklyn came a story that would change wrestling forever. A friend took him to a local wrestling club hidden away in a basement. The second Pedro stepped on those old mats, something clicked. He had found his calling. The fighting spirit he'd built up playing with his 85 cousins had found a new home. At just 13, Pedro wasn't just another kid at the club. He was a natural. His amateur wrestling skills started getting noticed, with coaches and other wrestlers seeing something special in the young islander. But Pedro had another talent too. On Brooklyn's baseball fields, he showed such skill that Puerto Rico's Pro League wanted to sign him at just 16, a dream chance for most kids his age. But here's where Pedro's path takes its big turn. While other teens dreamed of making it big in baseball, Pedro's heart belonged to wrestling. Going against what most people would choose, against the safe path of pro baseball, Pedro picked the harder road of becoming a wrestler. It wasn't just a choice, it was his passion. Those early days wrestling in Brooklyn's gyms were just the beginning. Training after school while other kids hung out at diners, Pedro was building himself into something special. The year 1959 marked the beginning of a wrestling journey that would rewrite the history books. At just 17, with his father's blessing and determination in his heart, Pedro Morales stepped into the professional ring for the first time in New York City. That moment wasn't just a debut, it was the birth of a legend. But becoming a wrestling star isn't as simple as walking into the ring. Those early years tested everything Pedro had. Like a warrior earning his stripes, he hit the road, traveling to places that couldn't be more different from his island home. From the tobacco fields of Virginia to the mountains of British Columbia, Pedro learned the hard way. In the ring, night after night, against veterans who didn't care about his dreams. The road was his teacher, each city a new lesson. In Virginia, he learned to work the crowd. North Carolina taught him endurance in grueling hour-long matches. In British Columbia, he picked up the technical skills that would later become his trademark. Every opponent left a mark. Every match added another layer to his growing skill set. Some nights he was the hero, others the underdog, but always learning, always improving. Tag team matches became his secret weapon for growth. Working alongside seasoned wrestlers, Pedro soaked up knowledge like a sponge. He watched how they moved, how they timed their moves, how they told stories in the ring. These partnerships weren't just matches, they were masterclasses in professional wrestling. Through it all, Pedro kept pushing forward, building his reputation one match at a time. The word about the talented kid from Puerto Rico spread slowly but surely through the wrestling world. In arenas across the continent, fans began to notice the young wrestler who combined power, speed, and heart in a way they'd never seen before. In the early 1960s, the wrestling world witnessed the rise of a force they couldn't ignore. His partnership with Miguel Perez Sr. became stuff of legend, their chemistry in the ring electric. Together, they drew crowds that packed arenas to the rafters, with fans desperate to see the dynamic duo in action. Then came 1965, a year that would cement Pedro's legacy. When he walked into the WWA territory in California, the West Coast wrestling scene had no idea what was about to hit them. His debut match against the Executioner wasn't just a victory, it was a statement. In less than 20 minutes, Pedro showed California fans a style of wrestling they'd never seen before. Combining Puerto Rican flair with technical mastery, what followed was nothing short of extraordinary. Every opponent who stepped into the ring with Pedro learned the hard way why he was becoming the talk of the wrestling world. The Axeman fell. El Verdugo couldn't handle him. The Hangman got his noose tangled. Each victory added another chapter to Pedro's growing legend, but the real story was happening away from the spotlight. In the grueling world of non-televised matches, Pedro was proving himself against the best in the business. Jesse Rose, a veteran known for his brutal style, found himself outmatched. Charlie Kalani, despite his impressive Hawaiian fighting background, couldn't solve the puzzle that was Pedro Morales. Even the mighty Luke Graham, a man who dominated territories across America, fell to Pedro multiple times. While others relied on gimmicks or shortcuts, Pedro was building his reputation on pure skill, determination, and an uncanny ability to connect with crowds. In locker rooms across California, wrestlers started talking about the Puerto Rican phenomenon who could outperform anyone put in front of him. On a crisp March evening in 1965, wrestling history took an electrifying turn. Against the feared destroyer Dick Beyer, Pedro put on a performance that would be talked about for years to come. The three-fall match was a wrestling masterpiece. Back and forth they went, two titans of the ring pushing each other to the limit. When Pedro finally secured the WWA World Heavyweight Championship, the arena erupted. The boy from Culebra had done what many thought impossible, defeated one of the most dominant champions of the era. But winning the title was just the beginning. The real test of a champion is defending it, and Pedro faced a gauntlet of challengers who wanted to tear that belt from his waist. Horst Wessel brought raw power and brute force to their matches, trying to overwhelm the champion with sheer strength. Kurt von Stroheim, with his calculated European style, tested Pedro's technical abilities to their limits. Between championship defenses, Pedro found a kindred spirit in Luis Hernandez. Their tag team partnership became a force to be reckoned with in the WWA's tag team division. Together, they faced some of the most feared duos in wrestling. The Mysterious Assassins brought their double-team expertise and underhanded tactics. The Butcher, known for his ruthless style, brought various partners to try and defeat the Puerto Rican powerhouses. Every match added to Pedro's growing legend. In the ring, he wasn't just winning, he was revolutionizing what a champion could be. His combination of power moves, technical skill, and an uncanny ability to connect with the crowd set new standards for wrestling excellence. Fall of 1965 proved that setbacks only made Pedro Morales more dangerous. When Luke Graham took his WWA World Heavyweight Championship in July, Pedro didn't crumble, he evolved. The chain match that followed wasn't just brutal, it showed a side of Pedro fans had never seen. For 3 punishing falls, both men were bound by steel, but it was Pedro who emerged with the Brass Knuckles Championship, proving he could match Graham's notorious roughhouse style. But the story wasn't finished. October brought the moment fans had been waiting for, a chance at redemption for the WWA World Heavyweight Championship. The rematch against Graham wasn't just a wrestling match, it was personal. This time, Pedro left no doubt. He reclaimed his title and cemented his place as the man to beat in California wrestling. The championship reign that followed showed Pedro at his most dominant. Ox Anderson, known for his bone-crushing strength, couldn't overpower him. Killer Carl Cox, despite his fearsome reputation, found himself outmatched by Pedro's combination of speed and technical skill. Each victory added another layer to Pedro's legend, proving his first championship wasn't a fluke, it was destiny. While singles competition showed his prowess as a champion, tag team matches revealed another side of Pedro's brilliance. He formed alliances that terrified other teams, showing he could adapt his style to complement any partner. His versatility in these matches proved what many already suspected. Pedro Morales wasn't just a great champion, he was becoming one of the most complete wrestlers in the business. In 1966, Pedro Morales took his talents across the Pacific, writing a new chapter in his already remarkable story. Japan's wrestling scene was a different world, where wrestling was treated like a sacred art. In the land of the rising sun, Pedro found himself standing across the ring from giants, both in size and reputation. Giant Baba, a towering legend of Japanese wrestling, and the technically brilliant Michiaki Yoshimura tested Pedro in ways American wrestlers never could. The Japanese crowds witnessed something special. a Puerto Rican wrestler who could adapt to their intense, hard-hitting style. Each match in Japan added new weapons to Pedro's arsenal, blending his existing skills with the strike-heavy Japanese style. These matches weren't just about winning, they were about evolution. Back in California, a new challenge emerged in the form of Buddy Austin. Their rivalry became the talk of the territory, with the WWWA World Heavyweight Championship hanging in the balance. When Austin managed to take the title from Pedro, it set up one of the most anticipated rematches in WWA history. True to form, Pedro fought his way back to the gold, proving his resilience once again. But perhaps the sweetest victory came in the tag team division. Alongside his trusted partner, Luis Hernandez, Pedro captured the WWA World Tag Team Championships. For over a month, Pedro achieved something rare in wrestling. He was a dual champion, holding both singles and tag team gold. This period showed Pedro at his most versatile, defending 2 championships while continuing to innovate in the ring. He wasn't just a champion, he was becoming a complete master of his craft. Whether in singles competition or tag team action, whether in America or Japan, Pedro Morales was proving himself to be one of the most adaptable and skilled wrestlers of his era. Each match, each title defense, added another layer to his growing legacy. From the opening bell of 1967, Pedro Morales showed that his talent for tag team wrestling was reaching new heights. When he joined forces with Ricky Romero, something special sparked in the ring. Their February victory for the WWA World Tag Team Championship wasn't just another title win. It was a masterclass in teamwork that had fans on their feet night after night. But Pedro wasn't done revolutionizing tag team wrestling. His partnership with Pepper Gomez turned heads across the wrestling world. Together, they stormed through the American Wrestling Alliance, capturing the World Tag Team Championship in a run that showed Pedro's incredible versatility. 2 different partners, 2 different championships, but the same Pedro Morales excellence in the ring. Between tag team glory, Pedro kept dominating the singles division like a man possessed. Paul Diamond, known for his scientific style, couldn't solve the puzzle that was Pedro's mixed attack. Killer Carl Cox, despite his fearsome reputation, found himself outmatched again and again. Each singles victory proved that sharing the spotlight in tag matches hadn't dulled Pedro's edge one bit. The magic of Pedro's 1967 run wasn't just in the championships won, but in how he won them. His ability to adapt his style to complement different partners while maintaining his dominance in singles competition set new standards for what a complete wrestler should be. Every match added another chapter to a story that was becoming more impressive with each passing month. 1968 opened with Pedro Morales reaching even greater heights, particularly when he joined forces with the legendary masked superstar Mil Mascaras. Their matches brought together 2 of wrestling's most dynamic styles, creating magic that had fans packing arenas. But the year would test Pedro against some of wrestling's most notorious names. The matches against Freddie Blassie were wars, with Blassie's underhanded tactics pushing Pedro to his limits. Iron Mike brought his technical mastery, while Karl Gotch challenged Pedro with a brutal European style. Each opponent forced Pedro to dig deeper, to evolve his arsenal. Then came the biggest challenge, a shot at Gene Kiniski's NWA World Heavyweight Championship. Though Pedro came up short, the match proved he could hang with the absolute best in the business. But it was Hawaii that would become Pedro's next proving ground. When he joined the 50th state Big Time Wrestling, the islands didn't know what was about to hit them. Like a hurricane sweeping through the Pacific, Pedro took down the mighty Curtis Iaukea to capture the NWA Hawaii Heavyweight Championship. The victory sent shockwaves through the wrestling world, but Pedro wasn't done. In a moment of sweet redemption, Pedro defeated his former rival Gene Kiniski to claim the NWA North American Heavyweight Championship. The loss to Kiniski earlier that year had only made Pedro stronger, more determined. Now he stood as a double champion once again, this time on Hawaiian soil. The Paradise Islands seemed to bring out the best in Pedro. His partnerships with wrestling giants like Don Leo Jonathan and Ed Francis created some of the most memorable tag team matches in Hawaiian wrestling history. Each night under the Pacific Stars, Pedro Morales proved why he was becoming one of wrestling's most complete performers. Equally comfortable in singles competition or tag team action, capable of adapting to any style, any opponent, any challenge thrown his way. The dawn of 1969 saw Pedro Morales at his most dominant. His matches with Rocky Montero showcased technical wrestling at its finest, while his battles with the massive Gorilla Monsoon proved he could overcome any size disadvantage. When he partnered with Ed Francis to capture the Hawaii Tag Team Championship, it seemed Pedro had mastered every aspect of wrestling there was to master. The North American Heavyweight Championship scene became a roller coaster of epic proportions. Each time Pedro lost the title, he fought back harder, reclaiming it with a determination that inspired fans across the islands. These championship cycles weren't just matches, they were chapters in a story of resilience that defined Pedro's career. When 1970 arrived, Pedro faced a new breed of challengers. Johnny Barend brought his unpredictable style to their matches, while Tank Morgan tried to overwhelm Pedro with pure power. But it was Pedro's partnership with Binky Lee that brought fresh gold as they captured the Hawaii Tag Team Championship in matches that had fans on their feet night after night. The arrival of Abdullah the Butcher tested Pedro like never before. Their matches were wars, with Abdullah's wild, brutal style pushing Pedro to adapt and survive. Yet even against the dreaded Butcher, Pedro proved why he was considered one of wrestling's most complete performers. Mid-1970 marked a return to familiar ground as Pedro headed back to California. His partnership with Rocky Johnson created electricity in the ring, two athletes at the peak of their powers, moving with a speed and precision that left fans breathless. Their matches against John Tolos, one of the craftiest veterans in the business, showed that Pedro hadn't lost a step during his time in Hawaii. In October 1976, the American Wrestling Association witnessed the arrival of a force they weren't ready for. Pedro Morales didn't just join the AWA, he transformed it. From his first match, he unleashed an undefeated streak that had the entire territory talking. Bobby Jones fell first, then Moose Murawski couldn't stop him, and even the dreaded Baron von Raschke, with his feared brain claw, found himself outmatched by Pedro's combination of speed, power, and technical brilliance. The momentum carried into 1977 like a freight train that couldn't be stopped. Every match added another victory to his record, each win more impressive than the last. Then came the Super Destroyer Series, matches that pushed both men to their absolute limits. These weren't just wrestling matches, they were epic battles that saw Pedro and the Super Destroyer trade victories and wrestle to time-limit draws that had fans begging for more. But it was the Nick Bockwinkel rivalry that truly showed what Pedro Morales was made of. Bockwinkel, known for his scientific approach and tactical brilliance, was considered one of the smartest wrestlers in the business. Their matches became chess games played at lightning speed, with Pedro matching Bockwinkel's technical expertise hold for hold. When Pedro finally secured his victory over Bockwinkel, it wasn't just a win. It was proof that he could outthink and outfight even the most cunning opponents in wrestling. This AWA run showed a fully evolved Pedro Morales. He wasn't just the same wrestler who dominated other territories. He was better, smarter, more dangerous than ever. In the ring, he combined his Puerto Rican fire with technical mastery and veteran ring awareness that made him nearly impossible to defeat. Every match proved why Pedro wasn't just surviving in the AWA, he was thriving, adding new chapters to his already legendary career. The AWA had seen great wrestlers before, but Pedro Morales brought something different. His ability to adapt to any opponent's style while maintaining his own unique flair made every match special. Whether facing pure wrestlers like Bockwinkel or brawlers like von Raschke, Pedro proved he could win any type of match, against any type of opponent. Pedro's partnership with Peter Maivia created one of wrestling's most dynamic duos. When these two powerhouses stepped into the ring together, magic happened. Both brought their unique island fighting styles, Pedro's Puerto Rican flair mixing perfectly with Maivia's Samoan strength. But even their combined might couldn't stop the tide from turning. The crafty Bockwinkel and the brutally tough Angelo Mosca began gaining the upper hand, showing that even legends can be vulnerable. But Florida would soon witness Pedro's resilience firsthand. His victory over Pat Patterson wasn't just a win, it was a statement that Pedro Morales could dominate any territory he entered. When he joined forces with Rocky Johnson, they created tag team excellence that Florida hadn't seen before. Their matches against the ruthless combination of Ivan Koloff and Mr. Saito became instant classics, showing that Pedro could still hang with wrestling's toughest competitors. The Don Muraco feud wrote a different kind of story. These matches showed a grittier side of Pedro, forcing him to dig deep into his arsenal. While victories didn't come as easily against the powerful Muraco, Pedro's determination and experience often proved the difference maker. Each match was a war, with both men pushing each other to their limits. Then came the ultimate test, a shot at Harley Race's NWA World Heavyweight Championship. The match showcased everything that made Pedro special: his technical skill, his fighting spirit, his ability to rise to any occasion. Though Race retained his title, Pedro proved he could still compete at the highest level of professional wrestling. Pedro Morales and Rocky Johnson's chemistry created magic in Florida's tag team scene of 1978. Their 2 reigns as NWA Florida Tag Team Champions weren't just about winning gold, they revolutionized tag team wrestling with their unique combination of power, speed, and technical skill. Each successful title defense showed why they were considered one of the most formidable teams in wrestling. But when those tag team championships slipped away, Pedro Morales didn't miss a beat. He dove back into singles competition with the same intensity that had made him a legend. His matches against Killer Carl Cox became instant classics, Cox's notorious rough style meeting Pedro's technical mastery in battles that had crowds on their feet. Bobby Duncombe, despite his size and strength advantage, found himself outmaneuvered by Pedro's experience and ring intelligence. This period showed Pedro's incredible versatility. He could seamlessly switch between tag team excellence with Johnson and singles dominance against the likes of Cox and Duncombe. Each match highlighted different aspects of Pedro's abilities, his tag team matches showcasing his teamwork and timing, while his singles bouts proved he could still outfight and out-wrestle the best in the business. When Pedro Morales returned to the WWF in May 1980, the wrestling world felt the ground shake. His partnership with Bob Backlund wasn't just another tag team. It was a dream pairing that brought together 2 of wrestling's most skilled technicians. Their victory over the Wild Samoans for the WWF Tag Team Championship had fans believing in magic, even if a cruel technicality stripped them of the gold just 24 hours later. But it was December 1980 that etched Pedro's name in the history books forever. His victory over Ken Patera for the Intercontinental Heavyweight Championship wasn't just another title win, it made him the first Triple Crown champion in WWF history. Having already held the WWF Championship and Tag Team titles, Pedro had achieved something no one else had done before. The Sergeant Slaughter feud showed a different side of Pedro. Against Slaughter's military-style discipline and ruthless tactics, Pedro proved he could match intensity with intensity. Their matches became wars of attrition, with neither man willing to back down. But it was the Don Muraco rivalry that pushed Pedro to his absolute limits. Their Texas death match for the Intercontinental title showed just how far Pedro would go to reclaim gold. The match wasn't just violent, it was a story of determination and heart, with Pedro fighting through pain and exhaustion to emerge victorious. Each battle with Muraco added another layer to their storied rivalry. The year 1981 saw Pedro Morales take the Intercontinental Championship to new heights. His 14-month reign wasn't just long, it redefined what the title meant. Every defense raised the championship's prestige, making it more than just a stepping stone to the world title. When Pedro stepped into the ring with that gold around his waist, everyone knew they were watching something special. By the mid-80s, wrestling was changing. A new generation was rising, but Pedro Morales proved he could still hang with the best. The 1985 King of the Ring tournament showed he hadn't lost a step. Match after match, he displayed the same skill and fire that had made him famous, fighting his way to the semi-finals. Though Don Muraco would end his tournament run, Pedro's performance proved why he remained one of wrestling's most respected veterans. His partnership with Tito Santana brought together 2 eras of Latin American excellence. The young Santana learning from Pedro's experience, while Pedro fed off Santana's youthful energy. Their matches showcased the perfect blend of veteran savvy and explosive talent. proving that Pedro could adapt to wrestling's evolving style. Even in these later years, every Pedro Morales match felt special. While he might not have been chasing championships like before, his presence alone elevated any match he was in. Young stars wanted to test themselves against him, while veterans knew a match with Pedro meant bringing their absolute best to the ring. This period wasn't just about adding more matches to his legacy. It was about Pedro Morales showing why he'd been one of wrestling's most complete performers for over 2 decades. Whether in singles competition or teaming with the new generation, he proved that true greatness never fades. It just finds new ways to shine. As the final chapter of Pedro Morales' in-ring career began to unfold, he proved that experience could still overcome youth and aggression. His matches against Bob Orton Jr. showcased the veteran's ability to counter Orton's notorious cast-wielding attacks with technical precision. Against the tough-as-nails Greg Valentine, Pedro demonstrated that his fighting spirit remained undiminished, matching Valentine's grinding style with the same determination that had carried him through decades of competition. These Twilight matches weren't about chasing championships anymore. They were about proving that excellence never truly fades. Each victory over younger opponents showed why Pedro had survived and thrived for so long in a brutal sport. He wasn't just winning matches, he was teaching lessons to a new generation about what it meant to be a complete professional wrestler. When 1987 arrived, Pedro Morales made the decision to step away from the ring. His retirement wasn't just the end of a career, it was the closing of an era. From his early days in Culebra to his historic Triple Crown achievement, from Hawaiian championships to California glory, Pedro had built something more than just a wrestling career. He had created a legacy that would inspire generations. At this point, you might think everything looks good. Then where's the controversy? Well, let's rewind to 1973, a time that holds one of wrestling's most debated moments, a finish so controversial that fans still argue about it today. The match between Pedro Morales and Stan Stasiak wasn't just another championship defense, it became a moment frozen in wrestling history, surrounded by mystery and speculation. The ending came in a flash, both men down, shoulders pressed to the mat, the referee's hand slapping the canvas. But while Stasiak was clearly pinned, witnesses in the arena that night swear Pedro's shoulders weren't fully down for the full 3 count. Yet when the bell rang, it was Stasiak who walked away with the championship, ending Pedro's reign in a cloud of controversy. For decades, the wrestling world has debated what really happened that night. Some claim it was simply a referee's mistake, a split-second decision made in the heat of the moment. Others see something more calculated, suggesting it was a deliberately controversial finish designed to keep fans talking. And then there are those who believe it was all part of an elaborate storyline, crafted to create one of wrestling's great unsolved mysteries. Even today, fans gather in online forums and social media to debate the finish, sharing theories and breaking down every detail of those final crucial seconds. The controversy has become part of Pedro's legacy, a moment that showed how one referee's decision could create decades of debate. What makes this ending so fascinating isn't just the controversy itself, it's how it perfectly captures the essence of professional wrestling. In those few seconds, reality and storytelling blurred together so effectively that even 50 years later, we're still not sure where one ends and the other begins. The legacy of Pedro Morales raises important questions about recognition in professional wrestling. Historic 1,027-day WWE Championship reign, the record-setting Intercontinental Championship run, multiple tag team titles across different territories. Yet despite these achievements, modern WWE programming and documentaries often overlook his contributions. Some observers have suggested that Morales' Latino heritage may have played a role in his historical underrepresentation. Whether intentional or not, this raises valid questions about how wrestling history is preserved and presented, and whose stories get told. What's clear is that Pedro Morales' influence on professional wrestling deserves greater recognition, not just as a Latino pioneer, but as one of the most complete and accomplished performers of his era. The question of Pedro Morales' place in wrestling's modern spotlight touches on a deeper issue about how history is remembered and celebrated. His achievements speak volumes: a dominant WWE Championship reign, the historic distinction of being the first Triple Crown champion, and countless memorable matches that had fans on their feet night after night. Yet when WWE rolls out its highlight reels and celebrates its legends, there's a noticeable gap where Pedro Morales should be. While stars like Hogan, Flair, and Michaels are consistently featured in documentaries, video games, and merchandise, Morales' legacy often remains in the shadows. The contrast is striking when you consider his groundbreaking accomplishments. The timing argument that his peak years in the 1970s make him less relevant to modern audiences doesn't quite hold up under scrutiny. Other stars from that era, like Bruno Sammartino and Bob Backlund, receive regular recognition. Morales' achievements, particularly that first-ever Triple Crown distinction, should make him just as memorable and marketable. This limited recognition becomes even more puzzling when you look at his drawing power during his prime. Morales consistently packed arenas, connected with fans across multiple territories, and proved himself as one of wrestling's most versatile performers. The story of Pedro Morales' exit from WWF adds another layer of intrigue to his already complex legacy. His mid-1980s departure remains shrouded in questions that wrestling historians still debate today. While the official narrative remained polite and professional, whispers behind the scenes painted a different picture. By this point in his career, Morales had already cemented his place in history. Triple Crown champion, record-breaking title reigns, sold-out arenas across multiple territories. But his final years with WWF weren't matching the glory of his earlier achievements. Where he once headlined Madison Square Garden, he now found himself in a diminished role as the company shifted toward a new generation of superstars. The rumored creative differences seemed to stem from how WWF was utilizing a man of his caliber and experience. Here was a wrestler who had carried the company's championship for over 1,000 days, now being used primarily to elevate younger talent. While helping the next generation is a noble role in wrestling, sources suggest Morales felt his experience and drawing power could have been better utilized. What makes this departure particularly interesting is the timing. The mid-1980s marked WWF's national expansion under Vince McMahon Jr., a period when the company was actively seeking established stars to help build their brand. Yet somehow, a proven draw like Morales found himself slowly fading from the spotlight rather than being positioned as one of the company's legendary figures. The lack of public drama or controversy around his exit might actually be the most telling part of the story. In an industry known for public fallouts and dramatic departures, the quiet nature of Morales' exit suggests unresolved tensions that neither side chose to air publicly. This understated departure might explain why his legacy, despite his groundbreaking achievements, hasn't received the same celebration as other stars from his era. The final chapter of Pedro Morales' WWWF career tells a story all too common in wrestling: the challenging transition from main event superstar to a mid-card. By the mid-1980s, the man who once headlined Madison Square Garden found himself wrestling in the middle of the card, a stark contrast to his glory days as champion. The shift must have been particularly jarring for someone of Morales' stature. Here was a wrestler who had carried the WWF Championship for over 1,000 days, who had made history as the first Triple Crown champion, now watching from the mid-card as new stars took center stage. While many veterans gracefully transition into mentorship roles, sources suggest this wasn't the role Morales had envisioned for himself. His position on the card seemed to reflect a changing of the guard in WWF. The company was moving toward a more character-driven product, emphasizing larger-than-life personalities over the technical wrestling excellence that had been Morales' trademark. Despite his proven ability to draw crowds and his legendary status, he found himself increasingly marginalized in the company's new direction. This gradual decline in status likely contributed to his eventual departure. Unlike other stars who left WWF amid controversy or public feuds, Morales' exit was notably quiet, perhaps too quiet for a man of his achievements. No farewell match, no grand send-off for one of the company's most historically significant champions. The understated nature of his departure seems to foreshadow how his legacy would be treated in the years to come: respected but not celebrated, acknowledged but not prominently featured. Another shocking event happened in 1983. The Boston incident revealed a side of Morales rarely seen in the ring. Known for his professionalism and composure, something that night pushed him past his breaking point. While details remain scarce, witnesses reported that the fan had been hurling racial slurs and insults about Puerto Rico. For Morales, who had always carried his heritage with pride, these taunts struck a deeper nerve than any wrestling move ever could. The ensuing altercation led to legal complications that tarnished his otherwise clean reputation. Yet this wasn't the end of his legal troubles. The late 1980s tax evasion case cast a long shadow over Morales' legacy. The IRS accusations of unpaid taxes spanning several years created a financial nightmare that would follow him long after his in-ring career ended. While he eventually reached a settlement, the financial strain took its toll. These incidents paint a more complex picture of the man behind the championship belts. In the ring, Morales was the consummate professional, a technical master who let his wrestling do the talking. But outside the ring, he faced the same pressures and challenges as anyone else. Pride that could be wounded, finances that could go wrong, and moments of human weakness. The final years of Pedro Morales' life reveal a different kind of fight, one far more challenging than any match he'd faced in the ring. The diagnosis of Parkinson's disease brought new struggles to a man who had spent his life relying on his physical abilities. This degenerative condition, which affects movement and coordination, must have been particularly cruel for someone who had once moved with such grace and power in the ring. The lingering financial strain from his earlier tax troubles added another layer of difficulty to his battle with Parkinson's. Medical expenses and ongoing care created additional burdens at a time when he needed to focus on his health. These combined challenges would have broken many people's spirit, but Morales showed the same determination that had carried him through countless matches. Those who knew him during these later years often spoke about his resilience. Even as the disease progressed, he maintained the dignity and courage that had characterized his entire career. In facing these personal battles with the same courage he showed in the ring, Pedro Morales demonstrated why he was more than just a wrestling champion. He was a true warrior in every sense of the word. His legacy isn't just about championships and accolades. It's about showing that true strength comes from how you handle life's toughest challenges. Don't miss our other documentaries about the incredible superstars who defined wrestling in the 1980s. Like and subscribe for 100 years of luck. Until next time.